Suppose a young Adolf Hitler came home from World War I and had an unlikely friendship with a Jewish art dealer, and had a dialogue with him about art and meaning in a post-war Munich. This is the controversial premise of writer-director Menno Meyjes' 2002 film, Max, the titular character played by John Cusack in a role he took no money for to help bring this eerie historical fiction to the screen. Steven Spielberg's Amblin Entertainment had early on shown interest in the film, though Spielberg ultimately declined, feeling wrong about funding a project that would disrespect Holocaust survivors, but encouraged Meyjes to make the film on his own, which he did with help from John Cusack. If Max succeeds in any fashion, it's in creating an almost human picture of a man classified by history as a monster. The film does not create sympathy for Hitler, but it does present him as a pathetic, angry man who was a part in a machine that was slowly building itself. Noah Taylor's performance here is very strong, given the limits of the material, which portrays the man a little mentally younger than he probably was. It's written that Hitler's nationalistic vision was apparent in him as a child, probably pushed on him from his father, and by the time of the film was on his career path as a spy for the army to infiltrate and take over the Workers' Party. Cusack's character is the more interesting of the two, though to me he often seems to embody a view of the art of the time, more than he comes across as a believable veteran of World War I. It's a minor quibble because the film oozes style, even at its blackest moments. Max certainly asks questions, the main one being, what is the future? With the implied answer that the future is one where machinery chops people into hamburger. A motif best illustrated in Max's performance art piece that signals the beginning of the final act. But beyond that, the film has a harder time answering the question of what its message is. I feel that there's almost an unspoken social contract with historical fiction that touches on the worst human tragedies, and that is, if you're going to make that film and tell that story, you should have some illuminating modern truth in there, something that shuts you up and makes you listen, rather than stylize that tragedy to the point of pandering. I'm not saying films ever succeed in this regard, but it's a fantasy expectation I've long held. Max doesn't meet that expectation for reasons that are obvious. No film really does, but what Max does have is an eerie mood and well-rendered setting, fine performances, a great soundtrack, and in its quiet moments, a wordless meditation on what might have been. There is a real power in listening to someone whose opinions frighten you, and it's a subject that is very pressing in the world we live in right now, but perhaps too large a subject to cover in a film like Max where we already know the punchline. And so perhaps this film is best at the character study it contains in Noah Taylor's performance, which is my primary recommendation for this film. And I admire Cusack bringing everything he had to a film he made nothing for doing. But maybe there is a point in there. People do need to be reminded that every monster was once a human being. We like to think that evil has a human face and discernible features, but the truth is that fascism and racism and genocide are just virulent ideas that have always been around, that surround us and penetrate our lives without our consent, and sometimes without our knowledge. People need to be reminded that they will choose to not see the thing because they won't want to believe it. This idea is ultimately embodied by Cusack's Max because he fails to see the future for what it is, blinded by his own adherence to his liberal worldview. That's all for now.